So my co-chair, Jason, is on the call, and we're going to sort of tag team back and forth. So just to give people a little bit more background, so again, I'm Hillary Kane. I'm a Green in Philadelphia and have been the co-chair of the Coordinated Campaign Committee for a couple of years now. And we're the committee at the national level that's tasked with supporting candidates and campaigns. And Jason Nabewaniec, who is from Rochester, New York, is my trusty co-chair, and the two of us are going to give you the wisdom of our collective years of experience supporting candidates of all stripes, and really focus on kind of the early stages of what you need to do. So if you're running for 2018, this is great timing. If you're running in 2017, this is a little late, but better late than never. And unfortunately, in our experience, I think a lot of Greens don't really get started in earnest until later on in the year, which I think is a big mistake. So, so we're going to get into it once my computer stops thinking and lets me, start moving forward.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Not bad.
Great.
All right. So, so maybe I'll start, Jason, and you can do the goals part. Or I don't know. I guess we'll go back and forth. But basically, we're going to cover some basics of what you might be thinking about in the early part of your campaign, and certainly setting goals is a huge one. What is it that you're actually trying to accomplish? And how does that then give you a roadmap for how you might run your campaign? We're going to talk about assessing resources, assembling a campaign team, planning some kickoff events, and developing a budget. And I would say if folks can mute themselves for now, that would be great. That way we don't hear background noise like barking dogs, crying babies, ambulances going by, whatever the case may be. All right, so the first thing is why run for office? So so I know I just told everyone to mute themselves, but I'm going to, of course, now tell you to unmute yourself to make this a little more participatory. So what are some of the reasons that folks run for office? So who out there is running? Why are you running?
Hi, I'll start. Janice Richards from Houston, Texas.
Great.
I'm running for governor. And
Wonderful.
the reason I am is because we have a terrible situation, but I've decided to campaign positively only. So everybody who will vote for me already knows the situation, so I don't need to tell them what it is. And if I say the situation, it'll sound negative to people who aren't going to vote for me anyway. So I'd like to do a positive campaign, and I would like to accomplish defending, protecting, supporting the rights of the people of Texas for the first time since I've lived here since 1971.
Great. Thank you. So there's a lot in there, and it sounds like part of the reason is because things are so bad that, somebody's got to do something, right? What else?
Absolutely.
What are some other reasons to run for office? Who else? Somebody else on the call.
Jeff?
Yep, Jeff?
I'm running this year. I'm contemplating a city council race for the city of Glen Cove. The issues here is, there's a distrust, as far as our highly immigrant community, because of the situation with ICE, and we're going to push for not cooperating with ICE. And the courtrooms, we're going to try to block the courtrooms from ICE agents from coming in and intervening or interfering with that. And also, we want to stop the waterfront project in Glen Cove, which for those that don't understand, in New York, we have every town has an IDA board, which is an Industrial Development Agency board, and they're giving carte blanche tax breaks to these companies and corporations that don't have to pay taxes. And we're picking up the taxes on, we're picking up the bill for that, for unnecessary things. And, of course, a lot of other things, too. We want to preserve property and, change,
So it sounds like you've got a pretty serious issue-based campaign you've talked about two different issues, and that's what's motivating you to run for office.
I like to run also because I also want to promote the party. Everybody,
Right.
I'm a household name in Glen Cove. I'm a civic leader. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I've volunteered for the local, North Shore Sheltering Program. I served on a board. I served as a delegate. I still am a delegate to my county firefighters association.
Right.
And so
good. Okay. Well, good. So, sorry to cut you off, Jeff, but I'm trying to keep things moving. But I think you named another key reason to run, and that would be to grow the party. And so certainly what I think the issue-based, the issue motivation of, wanting to get an issue out there in the public and to move the needle on something is a very common reason Greens run for office. I think what Janice also talked about. Whoa.
Wow.
Somebody needs to put yourself on mute. So I think that is both the computer and sorry, I just muted somebody who had, I think, me on both the computer and the phone, what was going on there. So anyway, as I was saying, there's the issue-based reason. I think what Janice talked about is just like, oh my God, the jokers in there now are just so bad, we could do it better, which is in some ways partly an issue-based argument as well, right? Like we can do it better because of the issues that we have in our platform. But what I didn't quite hear, and what I hope is somewhere out there, is, obviously the main reason to run is to win, right? To actually get elected to city council, to county commissioner, to governor, whatever. For Greens, this is sometimes, not necessarily an attainable goal, especially the first time out, but it is something that, you need to think about. And I think if you're not, it's okay to not be running to win, and I say that like among friends, not necessarily for the broader public consumption. Like it's okay to have other goals for your race, and if you have other goals such as improving your community, bringing visibility to an issue, building the Green Party, you might actually run your campaign a little differently. And so, for instance, might be that if you're running to win, you might choose strategies that are more effective at targeting people who are already likely to vote and therefore have a greater chance of bringing you votes on Election Day. But maybe that won't ultimately build the Green Party if you're because you're not necessarily attracting new people to the Green Party. Whereas a campaign that's really trying to build the Green Party, they might spend more time going door to door and talking with folks who aren't previously registered and trying to get them to, in some ways buy into the system. So that's just sort of a for instance. These things are not mutually exclusive. Obviously the goal is to sort of do all these things simultaneously, but sometimes along the way there might be trade-offs, particularly when there's limited time and limited resources, and it's really important to sort of keep your end goal in mind. Another reason is to build name recognition for a future run. And this is not a bad reason to run, particularly in an off year, like an odd number year, is to, run for something smaller as a way to sort of just get some practice. Not only build your name recognition, but build your team and your expertise and your infrastructure and just sort of, get some knowledge about how to do it for the future. All right, and then we certainly talked about some other reasons. All right, so I'm going to do the SMART goals piece, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jason. So one of the things with planning is really thinking about, and I'm just going to scroll through here. Many of you have probably heard of SMART goals. It's a way to take those sort of more broad and lofty goals like winning or building the party and saying, well, what does that actually look like? How will you know if you've achieved it? And obviously winning is a pretty easy one. You either win or you don't win, and that's easy to decide at the end of the day whether you met that goal or not. But if your goal is to build the party, that's a much more amorphous goal, and it's sort of hard to figure out, how did you achieve it or not. So if I'm going to use that as an example, I'm going to give two examples. And so, and again, just remember, it's specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. And so with building the Green Party, the S might be, okay, the strategic reason is, the specific reason is we're going to grow membership and local infrastructure. So, what does it mean to build the party? Well, in this scenario, we're going to say it's membership, which makes sense and is kind of obvious, right? Like we have 500 Greens and we want to get to 1,000, let's say. But it's not just the numbers, right? It's also, what you've got. And so in this example, building the Green Party also means that we're going to build our capacity and our infrastructure. So the measurable piece, like how will we know? So this is, let's say, perhaps a statewide campaign, and one of the things that we want to accomplish is that there'll be 5 new county chapters by the time we're done. So that's like a specific goal, and it's measurable. We also want 300 new members and 150 new donors, right? So this is where we're really getting, specific. Is this attainable? And so, I can't really answer that in a scenario like this because it's kind of, I'm just obviously making stuff up here. But you would ask yourself, well, how does this compare with the current status? Like, is 300 new members attainable if right now you only have 10 members? Probably not. So, what kind of percentage of growth is reasonable to expect? How have you done in the past, that sort of thing. So those are questions you might ask yourself. Results oriented, or what's the actual purpose? Like, does this goal lead to our even bigger picture goal? And I would hope that for many of us, the purpose of building the party is to basically build a base of power so that you can compete in future elections and, of course, put out our platform and move our agenda and, to essentially to improve the community and to improve our country. And then what's the time measure? Well, I'm going to say by the end of the year. And the reason I don't necessarily have election day here is because sometimes this party growth piece happens after the election. So, for example, what we've seen in this past year, at least here in Pennsylvania, is that we didn't necessarily grow the party. I mean, we did grow the party during the campaign, but we really grew right after, right? Our November meeting is what really attracted a lot more people. And so it actually took beyond the campaign to achieve that particular goal. And then the other example here, of course, for winning, since that's a big one for a lot of folks, again, is, like your specific goal, for example, win county commissioner. We do a whole nother call on voter targeting, and I recommend that you listen to our recording of last year and wait for the one this year. What does it actually take to win office? And this is a big one. Having some sense of what the numbers are is a huge component that I think a lot of Greens sort of just gloss over. And it really, not only like how many votes you need, but from what divisions and districts, where are they going to come from, and there's definitely a science and an art to figuring this out. But, if it's a head-to-head race, your goal is to achieve 50 plus 1% of the vote, right? If it's more than the head-to-head race, then it gets more complicated. But so it's not just percentages that you want, but also, an actual vote target. So interestingly, in Sherry's campaign, and we're still trying to figure out what exactly happened, but, we know special elections are historic, like low turnout elections, right? Like people barely know there's an election going on. They don't, there's not a whole lot of advertising. It's a very short turnaround. But I know we had estimates that in order for Sherry to win, she would need like 3,000 votes. And there were only 2,400 votes cast in the entire election. So clearly our numbers were way off. But, so obviously we need to do a better job. But the point being is that we had this very specific and measurable target. And we broken down by division and where we were going to get these votes and how they were going to come in. And that's, something that you should be thinking about. Is it achievable? Like how did a previous Green do in this district or in this race? Have you run for office before? How did you do? If there's any history whatsoever that you can use. In Sherry's case, we were actually using Bernie voters in the previous year's primary as a sort of general approximation for, progressive-minded voters that we might have a better shot with. So it doesn't always have to be Greens, but is there some reasonable expectation that you can win based on prior track record? And then, of course, again, the sort of how is it results oriented? What's the ultimate purpose? Again, if we're implementing the Green platform, and then again, and in this case, it really is election day is the sense of urgency. This is what you're working towards. So that's my piece on setting goals. I think I'm going to turn it over to Jason for the resources piece.
All right. So assessing your resources, it really involves sitting down and looking at both what you're going to need to achieve those goals and what you have the ability to obtain and what you have at the onset. So really, setting those out and working through your plan to get where you need to be by Election Day. Financial is obviously a huge component of running an election in almost every case. Your yard signs, your literature, your advertising, just general supplies that you're going to need going door to door. You want to make sure that you've got, enough clipboards or technology if you're using, any type of electronic devices, paying for a website. So really sitting down and writing out the whole arc of the campaign and everything you're going to need and figuring out a cost associated with all those to really figure that out, and then look into, how much money of your own are you going to put in, how much money do you plan to raise, and then once you know how much money you plan to raise, how many people do you need to reach to raise that money? And you really want to look at what other campaigns have done. One great reference is going back through historical financial reportings from other candidates, both your opponents and other Greens that have run. And it's not just how much money they raised and spent that's going to be interesting to you, but what they spent it on. If you don't know who to contact in your area about making signs, that's one place to look. And that's also a great job for a new volunteer, someone who's not necessarily comfortable going out and talking to people yet. Sending them in to do research at the Board of Elections or Secretary of State's office, whoever holds that data in your area. That's a great volunteer opportunity for someone like that. Your human resources, obviously, any larger campaign, any real active campaign, any campaign with a door-to-door effort is going to take quite a bit of personnel. You need people to organize your volunteers. You're going to need a treasurer. You're going to need a campaign manager. You'll probably need a website person. So there's a lot of roles, and we'll get into that. But you really should know up front what positions you're going to need filled, and who you have to ask for those. Who you have to ask to fit into those spots, and then also figuring out the timeline for when those spots need to be filled. Some stuff can be done later in the campaign, and some things are pretty much necessary before you even announce. And then just the hard infrastructure, your database, your voter list, getting that set up, what that's going to take. Typically, getting through the the technical aspect of tracking who your potential voters are and how you're doing at reaching them is not something that the candidate will be working with. That's something for someone else in the campaign, to be running that. So figuring out who is going to do that and what your platform is going to be.
Could you repeat that again? What's the responsibility to ask who what?
For setting up your database. So you're going to need a database that tracks who your targeted voters are, who's going to be donating, who's volunteering, when they're doing it. There's a lot of data collection that will go on during a campaign, and you want to make sure that you know what type of platform you need and have somebody that's capable of running that. Are you just using Excel spreadsheets, or do you need more like a nation builder database? Do you need something that interfaces with a web application? Do you need something that interfaces with like a phone application for your door-to-door volunteers? So you really want to make sure that you figure out some of those technological approaches and have somebody in place that can handle all of that.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned door-to-door several times, and I've been door-to-door in several capacities, both in sales and in, political work. I haven't always found it to be as effective, and in fact, I sort of find that people consider me just another politician and kind of find that I'm interrupting their time, that I'm a nuisance. Is there a better way than door-to-door? Is there a more effective way than door-to-door? Is there another way to do it? Could I hang out at a public place and shake hands or something, rather than disturbing people in their homes?
To do it, but what you're going to get the most return on is trying to target that list down to people that you think you can get to. You don't want to go every single door, but you want to start with that voter registration list. Make sure you're only going to register voters, and then here, depending on what your goals are, you may be only targeting super voters, people that vote in every single election, people that vote in primaries. You may only want to vote for people, or you may only want to target houses that have people that are not registered in the Democratic or Republican Party. If there's only one other candidate, you may want to target, people that are not in their party. So really working that down and, making sure that you have a really short script for anyone who's disinterested. Where you can say, well, thank you, here's my flyer, and not spend time with them. But certainly there's also value for, standing in a very public place, going to bigger events. But you're really increasing the percentage of time you're spending on people who may or may not be voters.
Jason,
yes.
What the fellow said before about being a salesperson, there's another thing that I find that's a turnoff, and I'm sorry, but if anybody has a robocall with a voice to say, please vote for something, I'm going to hang up on them, and I'm inclined to vote for that person. I'd rather have a live person call me up, or the candidate themselves say, hi, I'm such and such, I'm calling on behalf of such and such, or I am the candidate.
Live calls are always better than robocalls. There's a lot of data that shows that robocalls help to some extent, but it's pretty low. So you really, if you're going to go that way, you really want to try to make it as least offensive and annoying as you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something like just a quick reminder, it's election day, my name's so-and-so, and just make it quick. I know there's some people that have tried to add a little bit of comic relief in the robocalls. But, yeah, certainly personal calls are always better. The more personal you can make the interactions, the better. And the more targeted you can make those interactions so that you're not wasting time on people that are either out of the district or, not voters, or even people that are voters for your opponents. You don't want to waste time getting them to the polls. So anything you can do to target that to make your time more efficient.
And how do you know that those voters are for your opponents, unless they have obviously a lawn sign or a bumper sticker?
Research. You don't always know, but do as much research as you can. Depending on the size of your election. But if you're doing door-to-door campaigning, you should be doing a fair amount of research. And that may be just, you may only have, they voted in the Democratic Party primary every year, and just have a good feeling going in that this person's probably not going to be voting for me.
Can I jump in here?
Sure.
This is Kim from New York.
Who's this?
This is Kimberly from New York, from Long Island.
Kimberly, which Kimberly is this?
This is Kimberly Cooley.
From Long Island? Nassau or Suffolk?
Nassau.
Oh, wait, we're in Nassau.
I'm in Baldwin. So
I met you before. Hi, how are you? Go ahead.
All right, let's connect on offline so we can catch up.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
But I wanted to jump in regarding what, I don't know if it was you or someone else had said about going, how do you know if someone isn't going to vote for you other than if there's a bumper sticker or a lawn sign? And I would caution, just in the 3 campaigns that I've done this year, sometimes there'll be a lawn sign for your opponent or a candidate of the opposing party, but that doesn't necessarily mean the person on your voter list is voting for the person that is in their front lawn. It could be the spouse of the person or the son or daughter of the person that you're wanting to target. Also, sometimes if people have certain associations, whether it's friends, employers, whatnot, that say, oh, hey, let me stick this sign in your front lawn, that might not necessarily reflect their views, and your number one issue might also happen to be their number one issue. So I wouldn't be turned off. I did canvassing for first for Bernie. So at first I was only used to going to liberals and progressives, more like-minded people. And then in November, when I was canvassing for the only Our Revolution endorsed candidate on Long Island, I was an assembly candidate, and I had never previously gone to Republican doors. And so, I came up to my first and second Trump lawn signs, and I was very nervous. And they turned out to be some of the best doors that I knocked on. So it just depends on how you, I hate to say spin, but how you spin your message and how you resonate and connect with the person.
Ironically, in connecting to what you were saying, Republicans have traditionally been, they were the founders of the conservation movement. It's important to know that. So there's some Republicans that are deeply connected to ecology out there. So what you're saying is true. You will find some Trump voters that are in favor of ecology, in favor of green issues. You wouldn't think it, but because the Republicans have a tradition in, conservation going back to Theodore Roosevelt, they might just turn out to be allies.
Right. And, you can make parallels to, the Bundy Ranchers and Standing Rock, if you wanted to make parallels to appeal to people in that regard, just in terms of, I personally see them as two very different things, but like I said, you could spin it and present it to the person where you could come at it from a more similar angle.
Yeah.
And regarding with the Trump voters, when I was going for the Our Revolution endorsed candidate, this certainly applies to Green Party, my approach with the Trump voters was, clearly the two parties aren't working for anyone these days. So that's why Bernie and Trump both did so well, regardless of what you think of Bernie. The Our Revolution is about, putting the power back in regular people. And they were very receptive to that. So I would imagine that a green message could work that angle as well.
Thanks.
Okay, we want to move on a little bit here before we get too far off pace.
I actually agree with Kimberly.
Those are some good points.
I actually agree with her because I encountered Trump voters, too, that supported me.
Then you want to make sure that you have, your media contacts figured out. Really go back through the past year or so and look and see who are the local media people that are covering both the issues that you're concerned about and politics. And you really want to make sure that you start connecting with them. A lot of media now, individuals have, Twitter and are using social media, so make sure you start following them and figure out what type of stuff they like to cover. That'll really help, when you start working on your own earned media and trying to bring things forward. And then relationships, you really want to look to the candidate's pre-campaign resume. What groups have they worked with? What issues have they worked with? And certainly if you're thinking of running for office down the line, getting involved in progressive groups, issue groups, and really starting to build those circles and those connections are important. And also when assembling your team, looking for people that are connected to those groups that are interested in being on your team to try and represent and build that bridge between those groups and your campaign. It really gets a foot in the door and helps you when approaching them, trying to get, whether it's an endorsement or help or even assistance in writing your campaign platforms and building those issues. So, those are all really important. All right, Hillary, you want to? Oh, thanks.
Sure. So other key considerations to think about when you're sort of assessing your resources is to not just figure out what you have, but also to think about how does that compare with what you need. And so, the sobering reality for many of us is that the amount of resources that we're likely to assemble is maybe not sufficient for a large statewide run, but is really more appropriate for a local race. And so, it really is just a different level of playing field to run at the statewide level. It's a lot more money to be effective and to be taken seriously, and you just have to have a much stronger team and stronger infrastructure and have people who really know what they're doing. Is it an open seat or are you running against an incumbent? That makes a big difference. Like, the context matters. an open seat is generally going to be easier to run in because, people are ready for some change, by definition. Whereas, here in Philly, for example, we've got Democrats who win, with 98% of the vote for 25 years. They've had the same seat. I mean, just unseating those folks is just an almost impossible dream. And it's just, one of the things that makes a special election, made Sherry's race such an opportunity, was that it was an open seat. And then, of course, look at the amount of money spent by the other parties. And in almost every case, we're going to be outspent by vast amounts. But, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be still trying to raise as much as we can and, competing at the highest level we can. And the question is just like, how ridiculously outspent will we be? It's really just a matter of your resources, and if you're not going to be able to raise $100,000 or whatever, or even millions of dollars, depending on what you're running for, how are you going to make what you've got effective at a level that can still compete with that type of money? And then community context is also really important. Like, is there some big issue in your neighborhood, in your community, that you can sort of ride the wave on? What are the trends that are happening? What are other people doing? Again, here in Philly, there's corruption and people going to jail almost every day, it seems. And so our district attorney, I think literally on the same day as the special election, the district attorney was indicted. That's an opportunity for us if we had a candidate to run for DA.
In Philadelphia?
Yes.
You mean Lynn Abraham? You talk about Lynn Abraham's old seat. What's his name? The gentleman?
Seth Williams is the guy.
The one that tried to fry Mumia.
Yeah. So anyway, he's out, or he will be soon. He's not running for re-election. We happen to not have a DA candidate, which is sort of a miss for us. But, if we had, it would have been an even better opportunity because of not only the fact that there's an incumbent, an open seat, but then there's also this sort of scandal and this, being able to point to, corruption in the Democratic Party and have it be actually obvious and on the record this time, as opposed to just, something that we all know. But all those things affect the context, and it affects sort of how much you need and, and what the race is going to be like, and, therefore what kinds of things you might spend money on and who you might be able to draw on. You might, those kinds of things are where you might get allies that you normally wouldn't. So, those are the kinds of things that you also want to think about. Jason?
I just wanted to jump in on one of the points you just brought up there about trends. You want to make sure that you know what's socially acceptable in your race. We actually had a Green elected to a school board here, and we did all kinds of planning and formulating campaign stuff, and then about 2 years ahead of time, we were paying attention to what the race looked like and realized that it was considered inappropriate to campaign for school board. They didn't like it politicized. and we had to scrap, the whole plan and come up with a different approach. So we ran for school board and were elected, but there was no door-to-door, no signs, no flyers. It really was, you go to these 3, meet the candidate things, and everything else was very quiet, backdoor, handshaking type stuff. So, really understand the community context is important.
Great.
All right, so assembling the campaign team, we talked about this a bit, but some of the real important functions for a campaign. The campaign manager is one of the most important functions, and they really do pretty much the overview of everything, know what's going on, really have the faith of the candidate and help them with all the planning, setting up meetings, and strategy, and someone that you can really bounce ideas off and do a lot of the work. They also will typically act as a surrogate for the campaign when the candidate is doing something else. Oftentimes you'll have places where you'll need to be in two places, or just the candidate may not be available at the moment they're needed. That might be a work commitment type thing. So really having a good person in place for campaign manager is important. Treasurer, that role really varies on the size of the campaign and how much money is being raised. But a candidate that doesn't file their fundraising appropriately, can get in a lot of trouble. So, making sure you have someone there that understands what the laws are for that race and is really going to be trustworthy to fill everything out, make sure they get all the information needed, and be on time is really important. Your volunteer coordinator, hopefully that's someone that is pretty enthusiastic and someone that's really going to help get people excited and be able to work with people and get them in the right spot for the campaign. And any type of real canvassing effort. If you're going out several times a week, someone that can work the phones and get people together, and then make sure that people know what they're doing, feel comfortable going out, and pairing and doing good at pairing volunteers up and laying out that plan. That's a really good volunteer organizer can really give a campaign a big boost. Your fundraiser, most of the fundraising and most of the real effective fundraising is being done by the candidate, but you certainly want somebody else in charge as well, someone that's telling the candidate who to call, when to call, helping them with their pitch, working on any mailings that are going out, helping do the technical aspect of it and tracking it.
Jason,
and they should be able to do a pretty solid pitch too, but you want your candidate doing a lot of the asking. That's going to be more effective.
Jason?
Yeah.
This is Jules. What you've got to watch for, though, like you said before, the laws involved. For instance, the office I'm running for, I am not allowed to ask for money for my campaign. So it has to be staff.
What state is this?
It's Pennsylvania, but I'm running for a judgeship.
Yeah, that's one of the unusual ones.
Well, judicial races are different. You're bound, I know, in New York, a judicial candidate is not allowed to know where the donations are coming from.
Oh, I'm allowed to know. I'm just not allowed to ask for it or receive them directly.
Oh.
So your media person, if you have somebody that's already has a good rapport with local media, that's worked with them, that knows them, they're usually a good person to have there, assuming that you have someone that doesn't have a conflict with their own job. And that can sometimes get tricky because a lot of your people that have that experience do have conflicts of interest that you want to stay away from. But anytime you're going to be putting out a story, you want someone to be reaching out and saying, can you cover this? Will you cover this? Here's where we're going to be, making sure they have the details, making sure that they're getting the candidate there. If you're calling up radio stations, trying to book an appearance or something, someone that's going to be familiar with the different personalities and being able to reach out to them, and certainly laying out an earned media plan. Technology we talked about a little bit earlier, someone that's going to be able to set up databases, websites, any type of utilities you're using for canvassing. Office manager, if you're running for an office and you're going to be opening an office somewhere, that's an important role to be able to have that office staff, to have someone there, someone that's going to be working with volunteers, someone that's going to be setting up for phone banking. And then your scheduler, someone who's going to make sure the candidate knows where they need to be every day, and make sure that any events are being coordinated and set up, any door-to-door canvassing, making sure that there's a spot set up for people to meet. If they're going to do any type of thing afterwards, a lot of times when you're doing a big canvassing, volunteers might meet either for breakfast before they go out or lunch afterwards, just something for some team building, sharing stories, and a little bit more fun. So certainly making sure that you know of any events that the candidate needs to be at. Is there a parade they need to be at? Is there a meet the candidates night they need to be at? And really making sure that those opportunities aren't missed.
Great. And just one thing that I'll add is there's a reason I sort of clustered these. In my experience, they're sort of in order of importance. And so for the most part, legally you almost always have to have a treasurer. And functionally, you really do need a campaign manager. After that, the next tier of it's important to have people who are volunteer coordinators, fundraisers, media liaisons, technology. Those aren't necessarily paid staff, but, super extra volunteers who are really taking on larger chunks of work. And then the more sophisticated campaigns are going to have things like office managers, schedulers, and other folks like that. I think it's also really important, and I say this coming off a recent campaign, that these roles are clearly defined. One of the things that I think really tripped us up in Sherry's race, quite frankly, was, many people with the same hat, more than one manager, deputy managers, co-managers, and it just got really confusing to, who's actually making decisions, in Sherry's absence? Who really needs to know this type of thing versus this other thing? And so, who's really the point person for volunteers? And so just, as much as possible, be clear about what these roles are, who's responsible for what, and then, if it's not working, make changes. As the candidate, in some ways, you're the little CEO of this operation. You can say, you know what, you've dropped the ball 3 times, we don't have time for this, and move on. And, it may not be, obviously you want to manage people nicely, and it's not just throwing your ego all over the place, but you don't have to let people, learn from their failures to the point where it's killing your campaign. The sad, the reality is that a well-run campaign is not necessarily run democratically, right? It's not the party. It's a different type of operation. It's a very goal-oriented thing where, you've got this thing that you're trying to accomplish, and it's very time-limited. There's no time to waste, and things have to get done, and people need to be, it's really about creating a team that can really, move the ball down the field, to totally mix metaphors here. And so I just wanted to talk about, in some ways it's very much like managing any other type of organization. Many times, it's in the last 8 weeks, because a special election is this really frenetic, crazy thing. It really did feel many times like starting a small business and immediately being expected to, be up and running with zero, planning and development, and unfortunately that's what campaigns are like. You don't necessarily have a culture of working together. Like when I think about what it's like in my day job, I've worked with people for years, and we know what our strengths and weaknesses are. And when, I know if so-and-so says that they're going to do X, well, really they're going to do X with, and Y, and they're going to do it in this time frame. On a campaign, if you've not worked with these people before at this level, it's really hard. You just don't have that lived experience, but you need to be functioning as if you do. So, really being thoughtful about assembling that team and really making it feel like a team, I think, is really important. All right. Let's see, moving on. All right, kickoff event. So just think about, don't be a well-kept secret. Folks, you need to know that you're out there and that you've got a race here. And for the most part, I think Greens are often really, we're not as good about sort of promoting ourselves and tooting our own horns as often as the other guys. And so, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Anything can be a press conference. Anything can be an event. And it's okay if not 1 million people are there. Oftentimes what you get out of it at the end, the pictures, the press release, the content for your website is worth it, even if the event itself didn't feel like it was as amazing as you wanted. So definitely think about, if you haven't already done this, even if you've already been running for office for 2 months, you can still have an announcement. It's okay. It's almost like you've had a soft grand opening and now you're having the real grand opening. Make an announcement and think about where you're going to do it and why. The location can be symbolic. Do you have key supporters there? Sherry, actually did an amazing job with her announcement. There's I don't know the full story, but I want to say it was the first African-American woman who was elected as state representative in Philadelphia, many, many years ago, a woman by the name of Roxanne Jones. She was a Democrat. But, and she's now passed away. And there's this really great mural of her on Broad Street, which is a main thoroughfare, and it's her same district that Sherry was running for. And so she did her announcement at the mural. And even though, she's a Green and Roxanne was a Democrat, she talked about breaking boundaries the way Roxanne Jones did. And so it was a really nice and clever, way to sort of connect with a broader constituency and talk about themes that resonate. I think the mural is also in front of a vacant lot that I'm pretty sure Sherry has squatted in and put up a tent city in. So Sherry also had a personal connection to that space. And then amazingly, because Sherry knows everyone, Roxanne Jones' kids were at the press conference and endorsing Sherry. And so there was all these really amazing, nice connections there. And it was a great event. And you know what? I didn't attend because it happened to be the same day as our state convention. But regardless, I didn't have to be there. There was great photos that went on the website. There was a really nice press statement. For all I know, there were 3 other people there. I have no idea, but it looked and felt great afterwards for those of us who didn't attend, and it was a really nice way to kick off the campaign. So just think about having a kickoff event, an announcement. You can also do some early fundraisers and other events to get the sort of the ball rolling, to get people excited. Do a few early house parties, small events, in people's homes where they're going to introduce you as a candidate. Lean on the local party. I mean, if the Green Party in your area, is good for anything, they should at least be able to help you do a little bit of early fundraising. There should be somebody in the party should be able to open up their home or their apartment or something and, get a few bucks together and get some early money from sort of the die-hard dedicated few who really know what's going on to give you the base to then go out and seek bigger donations and do bigger events later. If you get to the point where you're doing an office, have a ribbon cutting. I mean, anything can be an excuse for an event, and in the beginning it's nice to have a couple of these just to sort of signal that this is a real race, you've got some momentum, it gives some people some social things to do, which is always important. Everything can't be, dull work and drudgery. That type of thing. Phone banking can be turned into an event, all kinds of things like that. So just do think about having some type of early event in your campaigning, and make sure that, of course, it can be a fundraiser. It doesn't have to be. And you can do more than one. So again, thinking back to Sherry's race, since it's so fresh in my mind, she actually did two announcements, right? She did an announcement in Philly, I think January 28th, on literally the day she announced her race and said, I'm running for this office. And then the next day in Harrisburg, when we nominated her at our state convention and it was official, we then literally adjourned the meeting, ran over to the state capitol, and we did another announcement in front of the state capitol on the steps. And that was another great photo opportunity. And so, in some ways she did two announcements, one that was sort of the local, I'm launching this campaign, and then there was another one for her endorsement. Now, in a race that's not a special election, those two events may happen months apart, and that's fine. There's always an excuse to do another event, a press conference, and to get your name out there. All right, Jason, do you want to do budget?
Sure. Again, we've touched on the budget, but we've got it set up here for depending on how big of a campaign you're running and your own ability to bring in some money. So if you're going to have paid staff, and a lot of campaigns do, that's certainly something you need the budget for well in advance and fundraise for. But even if your staff is just volunteers, there's a cost associated with that, and you have to really make sure that you've thought that out ahead of time. Are you providing on election day people out standing on street corners holding signs and waving? Are you providing them with lunch? Are you running around with water? Is there, other things you need to do along the way for that? If you're phone banking, are you, bringing in food? Do you need, what do you need for that? So working out those costs ahead of time is pretty important. Office space certainly takes a bit of legwork up front to know how much that costs. A lot of people are usually able to find decent office space donated to them. Just looking through with your own contacts, if anyone has any type of business that has space for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that space is going to have, that street storefront type of feel. So, are you just looking for a place to hold a meeting, or are you looking for a place to establish yourself? And then, how much is it going to cost to set up, your electricity, your internet? How many phones do you need in there? Are you just using cell phones for any type of phone banking? Are you going to be buying track phones or renting equipment from somewhere? Trying to figure out those type of costs. Printing is one of those things that you can get a good deal of information through the Board of Elections by going through past candidates to get a feel for how much other campaigns are spending on yard signs and flyers. And you want to find, preferably a print shop that's in the district that is union, and get some quotes from them. And oftentimes, when candidates that are just running for the first time go in for the first time, they don't realize the cost associated with that. Design, you do not want to start your campaign out with poorly designed flyers. If you can hire a professional to help with that, that's great. If you can find one for free. If there's, a local art college, putting flyers out there is something that I've seen candidates try and get some response to. But certainly you want material that has a clean, crisp look to it, that's pretty easy to read. If you're going to use a logo other than the Green Party logo, you want to make sure that you come up with something that doesn't look unprofessional, something that looks like you know what you're doing, that you're a competent candidate, that you didn't just slap something together. Rent goes back to the same as office for the most part, unless you're, renting out equipment or anything for an event. If you're doing an event outside on the street, or if you're bringing in a band or something like that, you might need to rent speakers and microphones and things like that. So there's different costs associated with different types of things that you need there, but and then technology we talked about a little bit. If you're doing a bigger database program, there's usually a bigger cost associated with that. There's certainly a cost for hosting most websites. You can do like a Facebook social media thing for free, but you would still want to set aside money to help promote both things putting up there and getting out advertisements for those, to get people back to those sites. Certainly advertising has a lot of different costs to it, and you want to make sure that you are really targeting both any technology advertising, any online advertising, but any local advertising too. If you're running a statewide race, you really want to be thinking about where you want to spend your money. You want your advertising to be overlapping where you have a door-to-door canvassing game. You don't want to spend your money where you're not working. So you really want to try and focus that. You want to try and do as much research as you can into, the cost for advertisement and compare it to readership and target audience. A lot of a lot of cities have progressive weekly papers, and you may want to look into advertising in those places. You may want to look into advertising closer to Election Day in certain sections. And then, any TV or radio advertising all has, set costs associated to it. So you really want to make sure that you know ahead of time what they're going to be and what type of ads you plan on putting out, so that you have money ready for them when you need them out. Ballot access, depending on your race, you might have to collect, tens of thousands of petitions, and that's not free. You're at a minimum, you're paying for cost of duplicating all your petitions, but you're also going to have to figure out, how many clipboards do we need? How many people do we need to drive back and forth across the district getting stuff out to people? Is there a copying fee that's going to be involved? Is there fees for submitting your work that you're going to need? Are there going to be any type of lawyer fees, legal fees associated with defending it? What type of challenges come up in your area, can come up in your area? What do you need to be prepared for? And then holding your events, whether it's a fundraiser or a campaign event, renting out space, renting a band, or anything like that. Food, drinks, decorations, everything has costs associated with it. So you really want to try and build that plan out and build it out with a timeline and know what fundraising targets you need to hit and when you need to hit them to keep the campaign on track.
Great. And then just one thing that I'll add is the low, medium, and high is really about, for your own campaign, make 3 different versions of a budget. If we only raise a little bit of money, like what does the budget look like? If we raise a little bit more, what does the budget look like? And then if we raise a lot, and what those numbers are going to be really different for every single campaign. But, if you've got a $5,000 campaign, you're probably not hiring any paid staff. Most of that money is going to go to, printed material, some website, whatever. If you've got a $50,000 campaign, you probably can afford to pay, to stipend someone maybe $500 a week or more than one person, depending. So, it's hard to know when you first start, like how successful you're really going to be. And so I recommend having sort of this low, medium, and high, this 3-tiered budget, and then getting, having a sense of like, okay, if we raise X amount of money by this date, then it's the signal that we've actually jumped into the, from low to medium, and we can, spend money on a few things that we may not have otherwise spent money on. All right. And then just finally, work with the end in mind. So, really think about, again, back to the goals at the beginning of the call, like what is it that you're really trying to accomplish and how are you best going to get there? And, if one of your things is that, we need so many people covering polling places, well, then what does it take to get those volunteers? How are we going to get 75 volunteers to cover these 30 polling places? Okay, well, we need to recruit 200 volunteers before then. Well, what does it take to do that? Well, we need to do this much, phone banking and this much door knocking, and really sort of work from, that election day backwards and not just the volunteers at the polling places, but obviously the voters coming to the polls, like the whole 9 yards. And what is it that it's going to take to accomplish all that, and then what is that going to cost? And then the why budget, it's really, really helpful in the moment. You know, I can't emphasize this enough, having been a treasurer many times over. Every time around, there's always some time where somebody makes a really dumb decision, and you know, spending money on the fly because, oh, well, this just seemed like a really good opportunity. You know, yes, but it wasn't in the budget. It's not part of our plan. It doesn't actually help us get us where we want to go. You know, it's the equivalent of like, you know, like just because the Maserati is on sale for half price doesn't mean you should buy it, right? You know, it may be a really good bargain, but it's not what you need right now in this moment to get you where you want to go. And so budgeting is really just, it's about planning. It's about having a sense of how much money you need, where it's going to go. You know, if you have some fixed expenses and things that, you know, you need to, if you're paying rent on an office, you know, you need to make sure that that office, you know, rent is in the budget, and that you're not spending money on other things when you have this fixed expense that's going to come up every single month. If your budget for printing is $10,000 and half of that is for election day itself or the weekend before and get out the vote, then you don't want to be spending too much of it. You know, like, then you need to budget accordingly and plan early in the campaign and do smaller literature runs, because you need to save that money and that budget for the bigger expense later on. You know, and it also gives you cover. I mean, you know, we saw this in Sherry's campaign. You know, everybody wants to spend money on everything, especially if once you have it, then everyone's like, ooh, well, can we buy this? Can we get this? And you know, it's a much easier no if you say, well, I'm sorry, it's just not in the budget, than versus no, I'm just, you know, I'm a stingy treasurer who won't let you do X. I think it also helps distribute some decision making, and so, you know, especially on a larger campaign where there might be a larger budget, you know, the candidate should not be making day-to-day decisions about whether or not to spend $20 on office supplies, right? You know, like at some level, the minutia is beneath them. They don't have time for that. They're making big fundraising calls. They're doing events. They're doing the media. And so other people need to be able to make decisions about how to spend money. And if you have categories and really detailed line items like, oh, well, the office supply budget is X. So that tells me that if I spend this $20, like, we're still very much in line, you know, based on our time frame. It's that kind of thing. And I think the other thing is it really shows donors that you're serious, particularly larger donors, who often themselves, you know, people with more money, I'm just going to make broad generalizations here, you know, tend to come from, you know, either business backgrounds or have experience, you know, budgeting their own money. And, you know, this is the kind of language they speak. And, you know, saying that I have a plan, like, if you give me money, it's going to go to X, Y, and Z. People are very much more willing to give money when they know what it's going toward in the very concrete. And when they like that expense, they're much more willing to give the money than to just the campaign in general. And so having a plan also helps you not only, I think, raise money, but it signals to donors that you're taking this seriously.
And certainly when you're doing those phone calls, you're likely to get that question, well, why do you need money? So having those numbers there helps with that. It also helps motivate you know, the candidate and the volunteers, knowing that, you know, there's a need for this money. You know, that helps people get over any insecurities they have about asking for money.
I just let you know, last year, when I ran for state assembly, I took everyone's advice from the previous calls, and I sent out letters to likely people that would donate. and I told them exactly in the letter what I needed the money for. I said I need it for literature. I want to raise enough money if I can. I said and this amount would be enough for lawn signs. This would be for literature. And I managed to raise within a week and a half before the election $287. And with that $287, I spent maybe with tax $136 on flyers. That said, I received this is the most votes I ever received so far, 609 votes. That's a record for someone in a big assembly race. And that's the raw score versus the Z score.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, I received only 387 votes, but only 15,000 people, 29,000 people voted in the election. But my Z score was actually 1.25%. My Z score was lower this time, but my raw score was higher.
Barry Stack.
Huh? Oh, yeah.
Barry, was that you?
Yes.
Go for it.
Okay, there was a statement made earlier that a union bug is preferable. I would like to actually say that every green candidate should have a union bug on their material, or they should have labor donated. And labor donated should only be used on stuff that is produced in small quantities. But if you make larger quantities, you need to print it at a union printer, even though the cost may be a little higher. In San Francisco, it's actually lower than what you can get elsewhere. But it shows people in the community that you stand with working men and women. And if you don't have that bug on your campaign material, shame on you. It's not green.
Hear, hear. I would agree.
Yes.
And I will say, in my experience, when campaigns have not done that, it is not for lack of desire to use a union shop, but it's because of poor planning and not having the time to, like sending something to a real print shop takes longer than running to Staples, right? And so that is, the bottom line here is to do things well takes time and planning and effort. And, it's just, that's it. And so it's not just on the budgeting, but it's on the getting it done otherwise. And so, it shows, people who care about labor that you're serious about labor.
The only time I've seen a green not do that and not be out of, pure necessity was a small village election where they had a one-person print shop that was located within the village.
That's wonderful.
Sure. Small, some Greens do prefer small business, local business, but regardless, it often, none of us should be going to Staples or Kinko's, but I've seen it happen many times because of just poor planning and the need to get something like in 3 hours as opposed to 3 days. And again, planning, fail to plan to fail, that sort of thing. All right, and the last couple of slides here, this might be the last one actually, I can't remember, this is, I think the second to last, is, really, and this is a perfect segue, have a good timeline, know what your deadlines are, campaign finance requirements, those kinds of things, have some goals and milestones. It helps motivate people. It also gives you a good sense of, like, are you on track? I mean, unfortunately, and I don't think this is unique to Greens, it's probably unique to everyone, but we tend to be a little overly optimistic about our chances, right? How many times have we heard, but this guy, this time he's really going to win? Like the incumbent is just so horrible. They're a bunch of crooks and losers and everyone hates them. And unfortunately, it's really hard to break through this two-party stronghold. And so, we have these very optimistic, pie-in-the-sky ideals, and if you have some midpoint benchmarks, it might give you a little more of a reality check, and also maybe refocus your energies and realize, like, okay, well, just, sending out the same email over and over again isn't producing the fundraising that we hope for. We need to try a different strategy. Jason, do you want to talk about the earned media?
Well, the one thing that I had in mind is, with your timeline, you're going to want to look for certain opportunities to get media, and some of them are relatively obvious. You want to have a statement ready for Labor Day. You want to have a statement ready for if your opponent does, some certain things that you're expecting. If there's any events that really tie into an issue you're working on, having that prepared. And then just releasing information about your campaign and platform. You may want to not put it all out at once. You may want to try and build each part into a story. So trying to figure out what your timeline for getting those releases, those press events out, is there something that ties into a broader story that's going to help get it published, help get reporters there, and plan out those ahead of time, so you're ready when those opportunities come up.
Great. And then again, having other important events on your timeline, and then I think the idea of having some sort of weekly or daily work plan is actually really important. This is almost like having a second job. In fact, it might be more than your regular job. It's a lot of work to do it well. I mean, I don't think any one of us can overstate that. And it really does take a lot of coordination and planning, and really having a sense of, it's not just a to-do list. It's a multifaceted set of activities. And then, speaking of a to-do list, this is basically it. These are the different domains. We obviously didn't cover all of these things in depth tonight. We will do future calls on different aspects of these things. But, if you haven't thought about each one of these things already, then start thinking about it. And certainly rely on your local party, your state party, people who have gone before you, those of us on the CCC. We're here to be a resource. You do not need to reinvent the wheel yourself. It's out there. We'll help you figure out how to use it. And then just, do your best. Put your all into it, as I'm sure you all are. And, don't be afraid to make mistakes. But, just, start somewhere and get out there and put out the good green message, and good luck. So I think that's basically it. It is 10:30, at least on the East Coast. I mean, maybe we'll do another 5 minutes of questions, but I'm sensitive to
Hillary?
to the time on the East Coast here. Yeah.
Hillary, quick question.
Sure.
The person, Kimberly from Long Island, can I forward you an email address to give you my contact to give to her?
Yeah, I can connect you guys.
Great.
Online. That's fine.
Oh, she's still on the line?
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Kimberly. You have my email address?
You can give it to me now, or Hillary can do it. Or
yeah, I'll connect you guys offline. Don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Good. Any other final parting comments, questions?
Thank you
Just
so
want to
much.
say thanks. It was a good call. Very good call. Thank you very much.
Thank
Hillary,
you.
when was the last call? I was trying to find it.
We did a call. at the end of February on women running for office. So here, while I'm still sharing my screen, if you guys go to, this is where you will find calls in the future, so gpus.org.
And there's a link in the chat box, too.
Yes, good.
/committees/coordinated-campaign
Yes.
/CCC/
Right.
or -webinars.
Yes. So assuming you're not going to remember all that, gpus.org. So this is more of our internal facing website for committees. So click on committees, click on coordinated campaign committee. Thinking. Clearly I have slow internet tonight. And then here we go, monthly webinars and conference calls. And this link will take you to what we've got. And so here's the one we've done in January already. In 2017, so January and February. And then there are some really good calls from previous years. So, I will say that just like listening to a recording of a webinar that you were not on is maybe not the most exciting thing, but there is some really good content. Jennifer Baker and Alex's call was really phenomenal, and Karen's is actually really good too. So this year I think we're sort of hitting it out of the park already, which is great. And then this recording will go up, later this evening, tomorrow, something like that. And then one person asked me for the actual PowerPoint, which I'm happy to do as well. And I think that's it, guys. So thanks for participating. And then so we typically do these on the 4th Tuesday of the month. And so I will say mark your calendars for April 25th. I think we're going to do something new. I'm talking with Mike Dennis, who worked both on the Jill Stein campaign and on Sherry Honkela's campaign. He's kind of like a website technology guy. I think we're trying to not do yet another call on websites and Nation Builder, but instead on other tech tools that could be useful to campaigns, so things that we may not know about. Right now the only examples that come to mind are things related to social media, and it's not necessarily designed to be a social media call, but it could be sites like Trello or other sort of project management tools. But there's just this whole host of, various things on the web that are mostly free and can be really useful for helping you get organized and to do your work. So that's what we're contemplating for next month. And I think that's it.
All right. I'll send you an email this week to send to Kimberly. Thank you.
Great. Good night, all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.